In the aftermath of Donald Trump's second federal indictment by special prosecutor Jack Smith, this time for Trump's attempts to steal the 2020 election from Joe Biden, Republicans and their surrogates have been skittering out of the woodwork, bending over backwards to justify Trump's actions and lying about the indictment, claiming that Trump is being persecuted, not prosecuted, but persecuted, for merely exercising his First Amendment rights. This is a lie addressed in the indictment, debunked by legal scholars, and by Trump's own conservative former attorney general. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. So, again, the Republican Party is an authoritarian cult of personality, and I'm sure many Republican politicians deep down want Donald Trump to just go away, but they lack the spine to challenge him, and there doesn't seem to be a candidate in the field who can meaningfully challenge him. Ron DeSantis, who's basically a different flavor of fascist, even he is struggling. His chances of usurping Trump are rapidly diminishing. And so Republicans are doing what Republicans always do. They fall in line behind whoever happens to be the leader at the time. So I want to play some clips of prominent Republican politicians, not just random Republicans on the street, but people with the political and legal knowledge to know better, making the claim that Donald Trump was just, listen, when he tried to steal the election from Joe Biden, when he indulged in this conspiracy, he was just exercising his First Amendment rights. And by the way, other people have done it too. All lies, but let's play the clips.
And I can say the same thing that Hillary Clinton says about her election that she lost. I can say the same thing about the DNC who said it about the 2016 race. I can say the same thing about those in the Democratic Party from the leadership on down about George Bush not winning.
So this is Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, a Republican, making a number of false equivalences because, again, that's all the Republicans traffic in. So Hillary Clinton never engaged in a conspiracy to try to steal the election from Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, her ally, Democratic President Barack Obama, was the president at the time. He was the incumbent president. Joe Biden, the guy who's president now, was the vice president certifying the votes. It probably would have been relatively easy for Hillary Clinton to try the things that Trump did in the 2020 election, but she never did. The election was certified. There were no formal objections to Trump's victory because Democrats could not get anybody to co-sign with them. There were like two random naysayers complaining during the certification of Trump's victory that he won, and Joe Biden shut them down. He's like, guys, this is over. Let's move on. So there are a number of false equivalences here, but that's all he has.
That Al Gore did. But were any of them prosecuted? Were any of them put in jail? When Hillary Clinton said it, nothing happened to her. When they said it in Georgia's election, nothing happened to them either. You know what? When the DNC said it, nothing happened to them either.
That faux outrage is so pathetic of Kevin McCarthy because, again, false equivalences. Nobody is talking about speech. And by the way, Hillary Clinton's speech had the speech she conceded the election to Donald Trump the same day or the very next day. So their rhetoric was wildly different. And again, this is not about rhetoric. It's about action. It's about conspiracy. And Kevin McCarthy has absolutely no evidence that Al Gore or Hillary Clinton ever engaged in conspiracy to overturn the results of the elections that they lost. But now we have Republican Byron Donalds. Let's hear what he has to say.
Congressman, have you spoken with President Trump since this latest indictment? And if so, what are you hearing from him?
So actually, we haven't talked. I sent him a text message about something slightly different. I mean, look, the president's a fighter. He's not going to stand for this, and no American should, because what this is from Jack Smith is a complete violation of an individual's First Amendment rights. You're allowed to speak about elections and the outcomes. Even if big media and the radical left don't like it, you're allowed to say it. Secondarily, because he was the candidate in that election, he's allowed to use all means possible, legally speaking, to try to find...
Legally speaking. Agreed, Congressman. And by the way, the indictment addresses all this, and we'll get to that. He is entitled to say crazy things about the election, even though it's in poor taste, even though it's unethical. He has a legal right to lie. He also has a legal right to pursue legal options to challenge the results, which he did in over 60 court cases around the country, and he lost basically every single one, even in front of conservative judges. So this is, again, not only Byron Donalds doesn't do a false equivalence here, but what he is doing is a number of red herrings because Donald Trump is not being indicted for anything that Byron Donalds is talking about.
Find a way to fight the outcome. He's allowed to do that.
So that's from Byron Donalds. Let me tee up this other clip here. This is from Senator Tom Cotton, one of the worst in the Republican Party, although, again, he has stiff competition. He's on Laura Ingraham, the Ingraham Report. Let's hear what he has to say on the matter.
Tribe of an indictment, but your thoughts?
Well, Laura, I think your word diatribe is well put. I've only had a chance to skim through it, but it seems like something that you would get from an MSNBC producer for a special on that channel. These are all constitutionally protected activities in which former President Trump engaged, political activities and free speech protected by the First Amendment. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to think he was right. But I don't see how these charges can go forward without a serious constitutional challenge from the former president.
So, again, Tom Cotton, like many others, is echoing the sentiment that this was about constitutional free speech. But here's the thing. This is from the indictment itself, paragraph 3, very early on. Jack Smith concedes. He says, listen, the defendant, Trump, had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim, falsely, that there had been outcome-determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means. Lawful and appropriate means being the operative phrase, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. So to make this abundantly clear, even just from the text of the indictment, this is not why Donald Trump is being indicted. But I want to play some debunks here because this is crucial. Republicans are, again, going out of their way to make the claim, listen, Donald Trump is being persecuted for just speaking his mind, even if he was wrong, even if he was lying. Damn it, he's protected by the First Amendment. This is an attack on free speech, which is what Republicans always say, even though their history has shown that they're hardly good faith arbiters and protectors of free speech. They're lying about the indictment. But just in case that's not sufficient, let's hear what other legal scholars have to say on the matter.
The First Amendment defense is a formidable defense. We do have an extraordinarily broad First Amendment, rightly so, especially when it comes to political speech. But here's the problem. The First Amendment does not cover everything that may come out of a person's mouth. And one of the clear delineations is fraud. If you use words to steal something, to steal money from a bank, to rip off an investor, how do you do that? You do that with words, by speech, by promising things. That's fraud. And here the theory is that's what happened, but the thing that was being stolen was not money, but the election itself. So the First Amendment does not cover that.
So that should be very clear. A lot of people who are don't have legal training and are easily, which I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm pretty well read and studied in political science, so at least I have somewhat of a basis to understand this. A lot of people just assume that your freedom of speech under the Constitution is absolute. It is not. As this lawyer pointed out, you can use speech to engage in fraud. Fraud is criminal, so there are limits to your right to speak. And by the way, even in civil lawsuits, defamation, slander, libel, you can be civilly punished for those things. Fox News is a great example. They had to settle for slandering and libeling Dominion voting systems, defaming them during the 2020 election. And even though the legal threshold for winning that case was incredibly high, they had to settle out of court because the case was so compelling against them, $800 million. You do not have an absolute freedom of speech to say whatever you want, whenever you want. And by the way, that certainly doesn't count for fraud and engaging in criminal activity. So just grow up. But this is former Attorney General Bill Barr, who was a Trump loyalist. People can say he's a rhino now, but this man is profoundly conservative, very far conservative, and went out of his way to join the Trump presidency because he wanted to make Trump a more effective president. This man auditioned for the role. He wanted the role. And during his 2.5 years in Trump's employ as Attorney General, he bent over backwards to assist Trump. But this is what he has to say on the matter.
Which is what Trump's attorneys are saying. And they're also saying that he was just exercising his First Amendment right here. Do you think that's a valid argument in your view?
No, I really don't think that's a valid argument because, as the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can even tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech. So, free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy.
Again, folks, this should be painfully obvious to anyone with a modicum of critical thinking skills, and I hate to insult so many conservatives, so many MAGA acolytes, but this is just the truth. The law is not on your side. Any good faith interpretation of the law from not just liberals but also conservatives conclude the same thing. Number one, nobody's freedom of speech is absolute, not even Donald Trump's. And number two, your freedom of speech, to whatever extent it applies, does not afford you the right to engage in fraud or conspiracy. And that is what Donald Trump is being indicted for, fraud and conspiracy, not exercising free speech. So anybody who's claiming otherwise is either ignorant or lying. Get over it. If this is about fraud and conspiracy, that's what Trump is facing.